I guess PD is winging his way to Alabama right now. He said he was going to try to tune in online on the airplane, and I have used airplane Wi-Fi before, and sometimes it works and sometimes it don't. So I hope he's able to tune in. So we're in Exodus chapter 9. We got off, we read it a little bit last week, but didn't talk about it too much. Let's just go ahead and start over at the beginning of the chapter and look at the this plague we have here, the cattle, livestock dying. Exodus chapter 9, verses 1 through 7. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and speak to him. Thus says the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, let my people go, that they may serve me. For if you refuse to let them go and continue to hold them, behold, the hand of the Lord will come with a very severe pestilence on your livestock, which are in the field, on the horses, on the donkeys, on the camels, on the herds, and on the flocks. The Lord will make a distinction between the livestock of Israel and the livestock of Egypt, so that nothing will die of all that belongs to the sons of Israel." The Lord set a definite time, saying, "Tomorrow the Lord will do this thing in the land." So the Lord did this thing on the next day, and all the livestock of Egypt died. But of the livestock of the sons of Israel, not one died. Pharaoh sent, and behold, there was not even one of the livestock of Israel dead. But the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the people go. What do you think? You feel bad for the little moo cows and all that?
But you know, the Egyptians not only lost their food, they lost their ability for transportation, they lost their ability to work. The animals, part of them were work animals, part of them were transportation animals, others were for food, and that had to be pretty devastating to the Egyptians, I would think. And yes, Pharaoh was, he's a tough cookie. I don't know what else to say about him.
I was thinking, why would him take it? Would he take the Israel's animals from him so he could eat?
No, he probably helped himself a little bit, but yeah, he was out of luck with his own animals. I've had a wild turkey hen hanging around my house the last few days, and I think it's a wild turkey hen. It could be somebody's pet. You know, there's all these heritage breeds of turkeys that have dark feathers and everything, and maybe a pet that got loose or something. It has my cat's attention whenever it comes walking through there. I think my cat's being a little foolishly optimistic there, thinking if she did manage to kill it, I'd take it away from the cat and have dinner. You know, so but I wouldn't want to hurt anybody's pet. But if Trixie did, well, that's. Yeah, that bird probably outweighs Trixie by about 10 pounds. So I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah. So it could be livestock or a pet, or it could be just a wild animal. I don't know, but I guess maybe the Pharaoh could also go out and kill a crocodile and have crocodile for dinner or something like that. Get a gazelle. But yeah, it's quite a plague. This pestilence that comes upon the livestock. I guess it's possible. You know, we've had the land be ruined so much by flies and other plagues that they've had that perhaps this plague is derivative of the plagues that God has already visited upon Egypt, but certainly it is a form of judgment upon Egypt, upon Pharaoh's house for what he has done, and the whole nation suffers as a result. I think maybe the big takeaway is that, this is not about just money, about well-being or anything like that. It is about life and death, that things are dying. And yes, it's animal death now, but sin brings about death. Animal death sometimes in the Bible forestalls human death, but it doesn't completely take away the need from it. We know that in the garden, after Adam and Eve sin, animals are killed for their skins to give them clothing. Before the sin in the garden, perhaps no animals had ever been killed, at least not within the garden. So, when I was teaching on that at some point in the past, and I don't remember exactly what lesson it was, but somebody, a young woman, suggested that maybe Adam and Eve were vegetarians. And you want to see people fighting mad, you suggest someone's a vegetarian to Church of Christ folks. We're meat-eating people. Don't be telling us that they were vegetarian. Well, maybe they were originally vegetarians. Maybe that's how God, set them up. They could eat from all of the trees and all that. And maybe that was the original intention for humans, was to care for creation in a way that didn't involve taking life. But with the fall, life is taken. Sin equals death. We are living, certainly, I think we can all agree that we are living post-fall, on the other side of sin coming into the world. And life is shed by that. And throughout the Old Testament, there are sacrifices of animals. We're going to see that that's important in the upcoming stories here about the plagues. That the Israelites need their animals to offer sacrifices to the Lord if they're going to worship him at all. So human sin involves sometimes animal death. And of course, in the Old Testament teaching, it kind of shapes how they view certain animals. Really, there is no bad animal. They are all just animals. They're not making moral decisions on what they do. You may not believe that if your neighbor barks at neighbor's dog bark, maybe your neighbor barks at 2 a.m. But if your neighbor's dog starts barking at 2 o'clock in the morning, you may think he's just trying to keep you up. But what do they say? The first dog barks at something and the rest of the dogs bark at him. Kind of. So there's something to set him off. And it's not, he's not picking on you. So those 2 dogs that are on the other side of our parking lot, I get a kick out of it when they stick their heads up and greet me when I show up. But Dalmatian and a Weimaraner, I think. So they don't scare me too much, I can tell you that. But they sure like to bark at me. So, but this is a clear message to Pharaoh that life and death is in the balance. And it's starting with animal life, but that shouldn't be minimized. It shouldn't be thought of, well, that doesn't really matter, or that it's just a financial hit, although it is a severe financial hit. There are cultures in the world that still measure wealth basically on how many livestock you've got. They don't have a lot of cash in the bank, if there's any banks or any cash. They don't have that, but they may have 400 head of cattle and 1,200 head of goats and 2,000 sheep or something like that. So that makes them in their culture quite wealthy. You have all those animals in our culture, you're probably going to go broke feeding them, but that's our culture, not theirs. So this is a big financial hit to the people of Egypt. But it's not just financial. It is very much about life and death. Anyone else have any thoughts on this?
It must have been an awful big job to clean up, because they were killed by something, a plague. So
Mm-hmm.
they were totally unedible. They couldn't use them for food or anything.
And even if they could, they would eat whatever they could eat right then and there. You can't store it for a long period of time unless you can cure it somehow or other. We talked a little bit last week about the Texans. Whenever they have a hurricane and knock out all their power, they empty their freezers and have barbecues as a result. But putting the best possible spin on a tough situation. And maybe the Egyptians were able to do that to a point. But we take refrigeration so for granted in our culture because everybody's got it and it's so convenient. I like to buy, maybe it's not as good for me, I don't know. I like to buy frozen vegetables. They're already chopped up and everything. And it's cheaper to get pre-made frozen vegetables than it is to buy individual fresh vegetables. If I want carrots and broccoli and cauliflower and get a bag of that for $1 or $2, or I can buy some carrots and some broccoli and some cauliflower and spend $7 or $8, getting all of them. So, and then I got to wash them and chop them up and everything. So we are used to being able to freeze and refrigerate things and get long life out of them, and especially with meat, and that is just not really available to them then. So when company shows up, that's when you kill the fatted calf. You don't do it a week ahead of time and put it in the freezer. You do it when they're there. So this is a very severe penalty, and perhaps, yes, as a result of how they died, they wouldn't eat them. Certainly under the Jewish law, they would, they have to be butchered a certain way and all of that. So whether the Egyptians were that picky, I'm not sure, but I don't know if you want to eat an animal that dies before you can kill it, but I guess there are folks that get by on roadkill. I'm not sure about that. But, it's interesting to me. I think that Pharaoh goes and double checks and makes sure that Israel's experience with this plague is very different. In fact, it's the polar opposite of the Egyptian experience. The Egyptians are devastated. Israel is untouched. So again, we're seeing how God can treat his people in a way that is very different than their surrounding people. He can protect them. And later on in scripture, we see how he can allow them, he can withdraw that protection and allow the neighbors to punish them, to defeat them, to lead them off into captivity. He can scatter them to the four winds and then bring them all right back together again. And that's the power of God on display. And all of these stories kind of set up or intended at least to shape Israel's understanding of the God they serve. These are the formative stories. This is, even though Egypt's the one enduring the pain, this is in a sense the birthing story of Egypt. Israel. This is Israel coming to be as a nation. And it's messy and it's bloody and it's not pleasant all the time. They are, in a sense, being birthed, you could say, out of Egypt. But, of course, they were put there by God. So there's lots of, we've got a nice crowd here. I don't want to get too much into the whole reproductive analogy here, but they go in as a family. There's a gestational period of time, and then they're going to come out as a nation. And this is, in a sense, kind of the labor pains. Egypt is experiencing the labor pains of discharging Israel into the world, the global reality. Yes, ma'am.
Another thing this shows is like with the insects, they were, along the river and all like that. And so the outline they could figure, was just natural. Where this, he did it just to the Egyptians. And so it showed that there was more than just the natural progression of the dying of the plague on the animals. because it would have spread to the Egyptians, to the Israelites
Yeah.
as well.
There's no natural way that, you could have Egypt be devastated and Israel suffer a little bit, and maybe explain that naturally, but for Egypt to be devastated and Israel not to have a scratch, it's a strong
It showed
testimony.
that God was behind this.
Yes. Okay.
But it showed both groups that God was taking care of Israel. Really, and it showed Egypt that, God's taking care of these people. Maybe you still ought to let them get out of it.
I think most of them are ready. It's not it's not their problem. It's everybody. It's one guy's problem. Just and kind of tying in with what Thelma would say, when you look at the prophecies of God that we read in the Old Testament, many of them are fulfilled kind of subjectively. They're true if you look at them from a certain point of view. And I'm thinking particularly about the prophecies given to David about his house and his son, and the way there will be a king in your line forever. Because if you look at it and you say, well, this is talking about Jesus, some of it kind of doesn't fit too well. One thing, the son of David was going to be a son to God, and when he errs, God will correct or chasten him. Well, that is not applicable to Jesus, is it? Because Jesus was without sin. It was applicable to Solomon, though, wasn't it? Solomon made a few mistakes along the way, and most of them had ponytails, I think. So it's that was he got led astray by the fair gender. So he led himself. I don't think we should blame. That's not intended. Maybe it came out that way. It's not intended to blame women for the downfall of Israel's monarchy, for the house of David. It is, and I think Scripture basically puts it at at Solomon's feet. It's Solomon that blows it, basically. He's the one who really allows idolatry to come into and become a part of the fabric of the culture of Israel after the monarchy is established. So, how you look at the different, like First and Second Kings, really blame Solomon. First and Second Chronicles, not so much. They really kind of whitewash David and Solomon, basically. So the texts copy each other to First and Second Chronicles draw a lot from First and Second Kings, but they're trying to do something else. We've talked about that before. That's kind of far afield. I don't want to get too much into that, but God has this purpose for Israel, and it's going to be fulfilled. Egypt, I think, really is intended to be an important part of that purpose, the fulfillment of that purpose. Egypt could have been like this mother figure. They could have given birth and allowed Israel to go out into the world and in a very healthy and natural way, in a blessed way, and been, I think, blessed as a result of it. But instead of that, this is designed to show the folly of humans, no matter how wealthy, no matter how powerful, the folly of opposing God's will. And you may think, today that our wealthy people are much richer than these people and they don't have to answer to God. Well, they do. And they may have big plans and big dreams, and hey, that's great. If God doesn't want them to happen, they're not going to happen. And if God does want to happen, nothing's going to stop them. So, like I said repeatedly through this study, there's always another Pharaoh. There's always another person trying to set himself or herself up above everyone else and have everyone else build them an empire. And we've got a bunch of them right now. Oh, we got so many Pharaohs right now. Can't shake a stick at them. can't shake a stick that turns into a snake at them. There's so many of them. So, okay, but Pharaoh comes out of the experience, this plague, with a even harder heart, which is kind of typical for him. Verses 8 through 12. Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, take for yourselves handfuls of soot from a kiln, and let Moses throw it toward the sky in the sight of Pharaoh. And it will become fine dust over all the land of Egypt, and it will become boils breaking out with sores on man and beast throughout the land of Egypt. So they took soot from a kiln and stood before Pharaoh, and Moses threw it toward the sky, and it became boils breaking out with sores on man and beast. The magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boils were on the magicians as well as on the Egyptians. And the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not listen to them, just as the Lord had spoken to Moses. Who, Pharaoh? I'm not sure exactly. It indicates that it went on all the Egyptians. I'm guessing that includes Pharaoh, but perhaps not, or maybe Pharaoh had a light case of it. But the magicians not being able, they've already kind of given up on fighting God and saying all of these are coming from God. We can't really combat these. Now they can't even be there giving counsel or wisdom or whatever they give to Pharaoh. Now they are unfit, either physically because of the ailments or simply because of the nature of the affliction, just not presentable, not clean, even by Egyptian standards, to be in public. Most of y'all probably are familiar with what happened to lepers under the Mosaic law, that they had to distance themselves from society. They're cut off from society, and they have to warn people. If you're walking down the road and you're a leper and you see someone else coming, you have to tell them that you're unclean. You have to kind of set off a siren so that other people can avoid you and you can avoid them. These boils, it's not said that it's leprosy, it says it's boils, but at the same time, these are visible skin afflictions, and may have made the person unclean or unfit to be in polite society. The magicians are not able to, for whatever reason, stand with Pharaoh and address Moses. Any other thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
It does say man and beast. So there were some animals that did not die that belonged to the Egyptians, other than their livestock, maybe the dogs and the cats and whatever. And those were afflicted by the boils, right? There
Yes.
wasn't a big enough time between the livestock dying and this plague for them to have built up their bought more cows and whatever.
Well, I think it's also it's hard to compress these. We read them and it is kind of compressed and go one right after another and after another. And I don't know that the stories themselves would have been understood that way by the original audience, and that might not have been. We scrutinize things. We pass everything through a fine sieve. We're really wanting to understand every detail and maybe catch something in a inaccuracy or something like that. And the original audience probably would have taken the stories more as just a message and kind of maybe for what it's worth, rather than we're going to hold this up to, this has got to stand up in a court of law, basically, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, they're still cleaning up all the dead animals, maybe when this strikes too.
Mm-hmm. The interrelationship, just as the pestilence might have come from the prior fouling of the land,
Well, I don't know that.
this might have come from
There's stuff in the air that made this happen.
Mhm.
But they'd have to get all the dead animals out of the way, and then this would hit them. So I didn't know how, I don't know, it doesn't give you any time frame.
It's certainly attributed to God using the instrumentation of Moses.
Mhm.
The animal pestilence is just from God. It's not presented as being Moses being instrumental in it. This is Moses hands-on throwing the soot up into the air. As we've talked about this a few times as we go through this study, there's a time and a place to note when God uses Moses and when God does not use Moses. But it's also fair, for the most part, to say when Moses does something, God is doing it. When Moses says something, God is saying it in terms of the message to and from Pharaoh. So if you want to say God does this, that's fine. If you want to point out the fact that Moses actually threw the soot up in the air, that's fine too. But Moses is so fulfilling in the purpose God has given him. He's in the midst of this, that he's just truly God's instrument in all of this. So when Moses does it, God is doing it, really. Any other thoughts on this? There's an old saying that when you're digging yourself into a hole, what's the first thing you should do? Quit digging. Sometimes Alma's right. Sometimes you got to dig some more before you can get out of it. But like guys, when you're talking to your wife and everything you're saying is just getting you in deeper and deeper, quit digging. Stop digging.
People aren't that smart.
Sometimes when you're in a hole, you got to keep digging to get out of it. But the thing is, Pharaoh is he's digging himself deeper and deeper into a hole. If you were a gambler, you might say he just keeps doubling down. He loses and he adds more and loses and does more and more and more and more and more. Maybe he feels like he's just got to win once. If I will keep doubling down, win one time, I'm back to square one. But we see that people, we sadly had a story of someone today who is just kind of persisting in self-destructive path. And while that story is a very extreme one and very sad on a lot of levels, it's not that uncommon. It's something we see in adults that are supposed to be mentally competent and able to make their own decisions and make wise decisions and take care of themselves. They will still sometimes just continually go deeper and deeper and deeper down the path of destruction, rather than saying, I got to stop. Before I can even turn around, that first thing I got to do is stop. They don't do that. Pharaoh is just going worse and worse and worse, harder and harder of heart, and seeing his own people physically afflicted. And having some of the support that's important to him is magicians. And they're not just like pulling rabbits out of hats and stuff like that. They are soothsayers. They are foretellers. They are Egyptian prophets. And to lose them is a big loss for Pharaoh. He doesn't have the support that he had before when he loses these people. So, again, and just to see your own people physically suffering, and however he's suffering, but to look at his people and see them physically afflicted. It's not just the bank account anymore. It is not just animal life and death. Some Egyptians have already died, but this is the physical well-being, the health of his people, and it doesn't change him. You know, as we've dealt with this pandemic, we have tried to take what we think are the best and prudent steps to keep people as safe as possible. And not just safe, but also show our concern and our love for not just our people, but for the community. If a bunch of our people get sick and go out into the community, they can get a whole bunch of people that never came in this building sick. So we're trying. The science is, frustrating at times, and I don't want to get into all the politics around it. But the physical well-being of our members has had a real impact on our elders. They are very concerned with that physical well-being of the people that come into this building. And to see Pharaoh not concerned, unconcerned with the well-being of people that are even the closest to him. Again, this is a very hard heart. This is someone who's gone very far down the wrong path and is going to have a very difficult time, basically impossible to turn around at this point. You can, the teachings on forgivable sin and all of that. That's a kind of a separate point, but God can send deluding spirits, and rebellion to God can lead you down a path to where there's really no return. And I used to struggle with that thought until I've met a few folks that were really hardcore drug addicts. And some of them recover from it, and some of them become good, healthy, productive members of society. But a lot of times they still have some lingering effects from that for the rest of their lives. And then there are some that get so brain damaged by the drugs, they're gone. They can't make good choices. They cannot surrender the will they don't have anymore. They've given up their will to a destructive force in their life, and now they can't surrender their will to God. They don't have it anymore. So, Pharaoh has gone so far down this path that he can't get himself out of it. God can, do anything, but he's not showing willingness to do that. He is really doubling down. He is becoming more and more belligerent. The more helpless he becomes, the more of a fighter he becomes to God's will. Okay, let's look at verses 13 through 17, and then we'll be dismissed. Verse 13. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Rise up early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh and say to him, 'Thus says the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, let my people go, that they may serve me. For this time I will send all my plagues on you and your servants and your people, so that you may know that there is no one like me in all the earth. For if by now I had put forth my hand and struck you and your people with pestilence, you would have been cut off from the earth. But indeed, for this reason I have allowed you to remain, in order to show you my power and in order to proclaim my name throughout all the earth. Still, you exalt yourself against my people by not letting them go.'" Hi, Kim.
But you walked in the door.
You got scared, didn't you? Kim's not that scary. She's pretty easy to be around.
We just thought she's really late.
She can be late sometimes, can't you, Kim? So.
She's up.
Well, this is kind of a bit of a pause in the plague narratives. It's not so much a big break, but God is shifting gears. There's going to be 4 more plagues. And God is in a sense, kind of, you could say maybe giving one last chance for Pharaoh to obey before he unleashes these even more severe plagues. But in another way, it's a way of setting up the last 4 plagues, introducing them that, if I had wanted to, you would already be gone. Since you have not been gone, I've been showing you mercy, actually. In these plagues, I've been showing you mercy. And you haven't been getting the lesson. You haven't received the message. You aren't acting appropriately in response to it. So we are now going to move into a new phase, and it is really going to be one that overwhelms Egyptians. We have hail, then the locusts. I don't know if we'll get through the locusts next week in chapter 10. The darkness, and then finally, and after a little bit of other discussion, the plague of the death of the firstborn. So there is this, as bad as it has seemed so far, it's kind of like God has been holding back on what he is going to do to Egypt and showing them mercy. And there's a time to, when you're suffering, to realize, well, it could have been a whole lot worse. And sometimes it's hard to think that way. But especially when your body is like the boils, I would think would be a very difficult, to think, well, it could get worse. And, but it could. And you think about the story of Job, how he has different stages of loss, and immediately he loses all of his wealth and his family and all that. And then Satan comes back later and afflicts his health. He's taking broken shards of clay and scraping himself to get really. Lately, my allergies have been so bad, scratching my eyes. And I always want to be able to see. My vision is very important to me, but sometimes they itch so bad, it's like you want to scratch them out just to make them quit itching. But no, you don't. You still you want your eyes in there. But that's, this suffering, this level of suffering, it may seem like it's really bad, but it can get worse. And God is about to show him even greater power, even more overwhelming examples of power. There is no one like me. And the reason you're in power, Pharaoh, is you're doing exactly what I want, which is giving me this opportunity to display to the whole world who I am. Maybe God is using a little reverse psychology on Pharaoh. I want you to say no to me. So, well, then I want to say yes. Maybe that's how you raise teenagers. I don't know. You tell them, I don't want you to mow the lawn. And then they go out there and they're out there mowing the lawn. I don't know. That doesn't work either. Okay. But Pharaoh is serving a purpose, whether he wants to serve it or not. And all this is God's redemptive power at work. Even people who disobey God serve God's purposes, one way or another. I hope that's not somebody trying to get in the basement, but I don't think so. Okay, we'll get into the plague of hail next week. Pick up there. Thank you for your attention and your comments. Have a good day to all of you, and especially Kim, who's just got here. So, Mr. Kelso,